Alright, so let's now create a new booking document in our database whenever a user successfully purchases a tour. So we're back here in the booking controller and in the route handler, which creates the checkout sessions, right? And remember that here we have this success URL, and this URL is the basis of the functionality that we're going to implement in this lecture. So whenever a checkout is successful, the browser will automatically go to this URL, which right now is basically simply our homepage, right? It's also at this point in time, so when a checkout is successful, that we want to create a new booking, right? So basically, we want to create a new booking whenever this URL here is accessed. Now we could now create a new route for this success, but then we would have to create a whole new page, and that's not really worth it in this case. And that's because what we're going to do in this lecture is only a temporary solution anyway, because it's not really secure, okay? So remember how we said some lectures ago in that nice diagram that later when a website is actually deployed on a server, we will get access to the session object once the purchase is completed using Stripe webhooks. And so these webhooks will then be perfect for us to create a new booking, okay? But for now, since we can't do that yet, let's use a workaround, which is simply to put the data that we need to create a new booking right into this URL as a query string, okay? And we need to create a query string because Stripe will just make a GET request to this URL here. And so we cannot really send a body or any data with it except for the query string. All right, so let's do that. And what we need here is basically the three required fields in our booking model. So tour, user, and price. So tour is equal to rec.params.tour_id, right? So what did I do here? So that's correct. Next up, we need the user. So user, which is at request.user.id. And finally, we need the price, which is at tour.price. All right. Now, as I said before, this is of course not secure at all, because right now, anyone who knows this URL structure here could simply call it without going through the checkout process, right? And so anyone really could just book a tour without having to pay. All they'd have to do is to open this URL with the tour, user, and price, and then they would automatically create a new booking without even paying, okay? So again, not really secure, but for now, as a workaround, it works just fine, because not many people will, of course, know that this is our success URL. Okay, because actually we're going to hide that fact a little bit in a second. Okay, so let's now create the function that will actually create the new booking in the database. So that's going to be exports.create booking checkout. And it's called create booking checkout because later on we will also have create booking, which will then be accessible from our bookings API. All right. Anyway, here as always, and let's start by getting our data from the query string. And so for that, I'm going to use the structuring. So tour, user, and price are available at request.query. So remember, that is the query string. Then we actually only want to create a new booking if all of these here are specified. And so basically we say that if they don't exist, then return and go to the next middleware. So that's our very standard procedure, right? So we say if there is no tour and no user and no price. So basically we require that all of them exist. And so in that case, we go to the next middleware. Now, what exactly is the next middleware actually? Well, remember that we want to create a new booking on this home URL. So this one here. Because again, that is the URL that is called whenever a purchase is successful with Stripe. And so what we need to do is to add this middleware function that we're creating right now onto the middleware stack of this route handler. So what route handler is that? Well, it's in view routes, and it is this one, right? So that probably sounds a bit confusing, but again, this is the route that will be hit when a credit card is successfully charged. And so this is also the point of time where we want to create a new booking. And so here is where we need to add that middleware function. So let's actually do that and require our controller, and I will just duplicate this here. So booking controller, and now I will actually add it here right at the beginning, because it doesn't really matter if we're logged in or not for this. So booking controller dot get, or actually dot create booking checkout. Give it a save, and okay. And again, this is here just kind of temporary until we actually have our website deployed to a server where we will then be able to create a better solution for this. Okay? So here in the booking controller, it is now time to actually create that new booking. And so actually we now need to import that model. So let's do that here. Booking and booking model here as well. And for some reason here I have this weird path. So these don't make any sense at all. So I'm not sure why I wrote them like this back then. So what we had there is exactly the same as this. But of course this is more readable. Anyway, let's now create that booking. And so for that we will have to await booking.create with an object of tour, user, and price. And that's it. Now we also need to mark this one here as async. And as always, catch async. Okay, and we're not saving this into any variable. Well, because we don't really need it. We're not going to be sending this back as an API response at this point. All we want to do here is to just create that new document. Okay? Next up, we could then say next, like this. And so that would then go to the next middleware, but that's not really ideal. So again, keep in mind that the next middleware in the stack is of course this one and the get overview. So basically the function that is going to render our page. But remember that this URL is all of this. So all this with all this data here. And so again, that's not secure at all. And so at least let's make it a little bit more secure. All right. And so what we can do here is to basically redirect the application now to only this URL. So basically removing the query string from the original URL. And so actually, we're now going to use something we never used before. So that's great, right? So we're going to use redirect. All right. And so now what we want is the entire URL, but without the query string. So what we could do is to just kind of cheat and copy this here, but let's make it a bit more elegant. So what we're doing is request dot the original URL, which we already used before. And so that's the entire URL basically from which the request came. And so now what we need to do is to split it by the question mark. Right? Because basically that's the divider between the part that we actually want and the query string. So if we split this by the question mark, then we will have an array where the first element is this, and the second element is all of the rest, so the query string itself. And so here we take the first element, and so that is then our homepage, so our root URL. And what redirect here does is basically to create a new request, but to this new URL that we passed in there. All right. So this will now create yet another request to our root URL. So we're again going to hit this route. And so once more, we will hit this middleware here. So the one that we're just creating. So for the second time, we're going to be hitting that. But now the tour, user, and price are no longer defined. And so then we will go to the next middleware, which finally is the get overview handler function, which then will just render the home page. Okay, made sense? So this is kind of circular then. So basically in the beginning, we're going to hit this route here, then a new booking here is created, and we redirect the application again to this route, this time without the query string. And so without the query string, in this middleware, we pass right to the next one. And so only then we get to is logged in and get overview. All right. And so that's actually it. All right. Let's just write here that this is only temporary. Because it's unsecure. Everyone can make bookings without paying. So again, that would be terrible for the business. Okay, now it's time to test this out. And so actually I want to do it with that other user that we created, which is Jonas at Mailsack. And that's because I want to see if we actually get that email receipt from Stripe. So let's log in with that user onto our website. So log out. Well, that's not working. That's weird. Let's reload. And that should be working. So let's see if we have some error in our JavaScript, because that is actually client facing. And we get Stripe is not defined. So let's see if we have the same error here on this page, which we shouldn't, right? And actually, it's not there. But back on all tours, yeah, it's there. So the solution to that is to move it from the tour basically to all of the pages. All right. So for some reason, the parcel bundler does it so that it needs to be here in the main scope for all of them. So for all the pages. Okay. So actually, let's put that at the bottom. So right here before our bundle. All right, try that again. And so now we're good to go. So log out, and that worked. Now log in. Of course, now our copy is gone. One, two, three, four. Oh, that's not correct. Test 1, 2, 3, 4. So I guess I changed the password at some point. So let's try new password, which is not working either. Let's try pass 1, 2, 3, 4, and that worked. So it's not test 1, 2, 3, 4, but pass 1, 2, 3, 4. At least here in my case. So let's try to book the let's say the sports lover. All right. Down here, book tour. And that still works. And that's the expensive one. So 4242, and then 42 all the way to the end. Then here some month. And here some number. Let's say my entire name here. And now let's hit pay. And now take a look at the URL bar. And indeed, we get our home page, so our root URL, without any of the query string that we specified before. So that means that something is working. So let's take a look at Compass and click up here to reload. And we get our bookings collection, and that's a good sign. And indeed, here we go. Our very first document is created. So remember, that was that price. Let's also take a look at the user's ID, which is this one ending in 8E3B. So 8E3B, that's correct. And I'm assuming that the tour is also going to be correct. So perfect, that worked as well. And so now we really have a way of creating bookings whenever a booking happened with Stripe. Let's also quickly check out our dashboard here again. That's really fun. And I guess I just have to reload here. So let's see. And indeed, here is Jonas at whatever weird name that is. We got the sports lover, and perfect. That's working now. As a final test, let's now check out MailSack, mailsack.com, and see if I got my email there. And well, actually I did not, but that's not a big deal. I'm not sure, maybe it just doesn't work with test data. And so for now, that's all I had to show you about Stripe integration. Now again, once our website is deployed, we will then actually use Stripe webhooks in order to create bookings in a more secure and a much better way. All right? So let's just again take a minute to recap what we did here. So basically, we added all the variables that we need to create a new booking to the success URL. Then we added a new middleware function here to the stack of that exact route. So this one here. And so like this, whenever this URL here is hit, we will attempt to create a new booking. All right? But that new booking is of course only created when the tour, user, and price are actually specified in the query. And so in this middleware function, if they are specified on the query, well, then we create a new booking in here. Then after that is done, we remove the query string from the URL in order to make the whole process a bit less transparent for the user. Basically, so that that whole query string doesn't show up in our browser's URL bar. And then down here, we redirect our application to this new root URL here. Okay? And so this way, this middleware here will be skipped, and then our normal homepage will simply get rendered. All right, let's just get rid of this app error here. And the factory we will actually need in the next lecture. So in that next lecture, we will actually take care of implementing one last piece of our website, which basically is this page here for my bookings. And what this page will do is to basically display one tour card for each of the tours that we have booked. So looking pretty similar to this homepage, but only with the tours that the currently logged in user has booked. All right, so that's a nice feature for our website, right? And so let's take care of that in the next one.